Today, we are taking a deep dive into the 2026 NFL Draft offensive tackle class. I'm recording this at midnight, the night before my flight. I'm going to be gone for a couple weeks, so I wanted to leave you guys with a bang. I've been working so hard to get this out for y'all, so let's jump right into this. It is going to be a top 38 for our Patreon supporters, a full version of this video. While for YouTube, you guys are going to be seeing a top 21. I was thinking top 20, but there's a certain player at 21 I really wanted to talk about. Of course, I'm going to give you guys a little bit extra, but let's talk about how I grade these players before we jump right into this. Of course, there's a scale of 1 to 100. What does that mean? Everybody can have a scale of 1 to 100, and this is how I end up grading it. First off, it is broken up into tiers. If you are 75 plus, I think that you're a tier 1 grade, which means a starter. Now, there technically is like a tier 0, which we do have 2 of those, which are the blue chip. I tend not to see that on a year-by-year basis, so I try not to have that be its own tier rather than us just allowing it to be like an elite tier 1. Tier 2 is going to be that 75 to 70 range, and that is going to be those fringe starters, guys you can plug in. Maybe you can play off the bat and just don't have the pure satisfaction of having a high-end tackle, but you know, maybe unless they develop, you're going to be looking for future options down the line. Then in that tier 3, you're talking about the developmental guys. This does not write them off in any way, shape, or form. They are really solid players, but at the same time, they still need time to develop and end up getting to the players that they're supposed to be. And last but not least, that tier 4, those are the backup guys, the practice squad guys, and we will be talking about plenty of those. And there technically also is a tier 5 that our Patreon supporters will see, which is going to be the non-NFL guys, the guys who I just don't really think have the cut, at least at tackle. And we will be talking about that a lot in this video. There are the categories as well that describe how I break down the score into a 100-point category. There is pass block, which is a base pass block efficiency, as well as just how good are you at pass blocking. I might not look like it. I played offensive line for 5 to 6 years, and well, I was at least able to soak up some knowledge. So I have some things that I've watched, some things that I've learned, and I like to be able to grade this position, and I feel very confident in my ability to do so. Of course, we're going to have misses, but we're always going to be honest. Same thing with run block. I mean, you can just see the efficiency there. Now, I am personally somebody who I think my biggest misses on offensive linemen, particularly on the inside, so not really pertain to this video, are those that are like really kind of that Mauler archetype. And that's something that I've continued to try to develop and learn on, but that is also, again, pertaining to the interior of the offensive line where I've had more of the misses than the tackle position. Anchor is super crucial and something I don't see people talking about enough. It is basically, can you hold your ground? Now, some guys, they have that initial anchor where they just lock in, you bump into them, and it's like, well, they ain't moving, so you are. But there are also those players, Josh Carnley was a great example of this last year, where you might be able to get them on an initial push, but they know how to dig their cleats in, and it's called a re-anchor. Really big fan of that. Those both play into that factor. Guys who basically can get blown up and can't stop being pushed into the quarterback, that's a big issue for me. And in the NFL, you just can't let that happen. I mean, if you can't do it versus 250-pound edge rushers or, you know, not necessarily great 265 plus, what's happening when you see Myles Garrett, right? There's just, again, that's the big extreme, but it does paint the picture. Then we have mechanics. Talking about hand and foot mechanics here, because I could blend it up into 2 different things. But at the same time, when we start separating into too many different categories, that's where we start overcomplicating it. And I do think that there's some organizations out there and some people who have just taken it a little bit too granular to the point where it's not really focusing on the football aspect. And I think there are some areas where maybe it's easy to be able to get some easy categories. But mechanics, I mean, I do think that you're talking about for the upper body, talking about those hand fighting capabilities. Do you also understand how to use your length, punch distance? There's certain things that are the finer arts of the game, finer details that not many tackles really have in college, but I really like to reward those that do. Do you know a wide variety of moves? Do you know how to snatch a player? I mean, if there's someone who's coming with their head essentially into your stomach, you should know how to just shove them into the dirt, right? And I do think that's something that's very important. Now, lower mechanics, super duper crucial. Now, there's a debate whether do you want someone with really good lower mechanics, but you can work on the upper, or would you rather have it the other way where they have good hand fighting technique, but the feet are kind of garbo? I'm a little bit in the camp of the upper mechanics matter more because I think it's a lot more timing. The lower half is a little bit more technique focused and a little bit more something that I think is coachable and not necessarily something that you have to have innately. You think about boxers. they have really great feet, of course. But I do think if you're looking at somebody, do you want someone who knows how to strike and counter strike and needs to work on their feet to make sure they're in the right spot? Or do you want someone who just moves their feet right, but they're just not great at being able to hit? So it's just an easier way to paint that picture as well if you guys did not understand it in the first place, which I know that you guys are very smart cookies. Now let's talk about power. Power, pretty self-explanatory. I mean, do you have leg power? Do you have upper body power? Is there pop to your hands? It's a pretty big deal. But at the same time, I do think that it is something that's a bit overblown. I don't think that it's the end all be all for tackles, but at the same time, it is really important to make sure that you are not the one at the losing end of the strength battle. Mobility is also super crucial. Some guys are really good in short space. Some guys also, even when that's the case, don't have that straight line speed to be versatile in certain blocking schemes like zone blocking, or if you're talking about versatility in terms of screenplays. If you're good in short range, that's awesome. But if you can't get out into the open field to get in front of a receiver or maybe a tight end or a running back who's getting a screen, then you are going to be essentially limiting your offense. So it is crucial to understand mobility. And then, of course, the biggest thing, can you protect your outside shoulder? If you're protecting your outside shoulder, can you be able to react and counter to the counter ends? So it's very important. Tackle positions very, even though I already had my rant, I would say that it is relatively granular, the amount of things you can nitpick. IQ, super important. Do you know who to block? When you are basically having nobody next to you, it is very crucial for you to understand what to do because you have only one side that essentially is a failsafe. It is very important, and especially when pretty much the pocket integrity belongs to you, especially as a left tackle, it's certainly very important to understand what's going on. And then hands, I also have an arm length and frame category I don't include in here, which again, talking about not getting too granular, but you got to do some things. Arm length or length usage, super important. I do blend that into mechanics. Basically, do you strike guys at range? Guys with 35-inch arms that use 32 of it are essentially 32-inch arm players, right? But hands are super important because are you grabbing out here? Because imagine that if your arms are out wide, you think, like I ended up talking to Gus Hartwig from Purdue, shout out to him at the Shrine Bowl. He was talking to me about the mentality of grabbing and keeping his hands super wide. And it's almost a insecurity of being able to control the player because when you strike close together and you miss, well, there's not very much variation that you can have there to be able to have a successful chest plate hit, right? But if you're going for those outside shoulders, worst case scenario, you slip and you still have your arms outside. So I understand that, but that's just not how you play the game in the NFL. You have to be tactical. You have to be precise. If you can't get your hands inside the chest plate, there's not a very good chance you're going to be able to be a good NFL player, in my opinion. I mean, I do think that's just something that I value a lot. Now, I don't have it very heavily weighted. And I also think for positions like guard, I think it's a little bit more important because you're in close range contact to where if you are bear hugging guys, that's kind of where you start getting the flags, but that's a conversation for the next video. We do have a dream fit category. I actually end up doing it only for one team because it just makes it so much easier and it makes it so much less wish-washy. And then it factor, basically, do you have good mobility? Is there an injury history? Do you just go really hard every play? Or are you kind of taking it lax? So let's get into this. And again, for Patreon, you guys are going to be getting a full 38. For YouTube, you guys are going to be getting a full 21. Let's jump right into this. And here we go into number 21 overall. This is somebody that I think a lot of people have a lot higher than me. Welcome into the people on YouTube. If you guys are not seeing everything before this, I did go another 17 tackles back there into number 38 on a Patreon. You guys can go support me over there. $5 a month. You can buy the video itself for $5, but you also, if you do the monthly thing, end up being able to get access to all the videos. On top of that, you get access to my board as well as all of my evaluations. So get excited for that. But we'll talk about Drew Shelton. You guys see that under his name, he might have a 59.25 grade as a pure tackle. I do have him in yellow at guard because yellow is usually what I end up indicating for someone who's a fringe starter at guard. So I really do have a lot of faith in Drew Shelton. I want to put that out there. It is as an NFL tackle, I do have my concerns. Let's talk about his game versus Oregon. This is a game from my scouting report, and it's basically you guys sitting next to me watching it with me. If you guys can't tell, it's the morning that I'm flying out. So if I do sound like I'm a little bit rushed, I might be, but I want to make sure I get you guys out this content so you guys get to enjoy it. Let's talk about his game versus Oregon. He handled the rusher well initially on a run play, but did not maintain control or positioning. He has good transitions, so when transitioning from one defender to another, he has some good hand fighting. So there you go. You see the mechanics. C is adequate, but again, there's also the lower mechanics as well. He let a rusher get into his chest and blow up his anchor. I'm worried about his big time about his arm length based on the fact that he continuously lost the length battle. He did attempt a snatch, which, basically you go and you snatch it. I mean, you guys got to look it up. It's much more difficult. I can show a lot of things in this little tiny camera. It's a little bit more difficult to display what a snatch is. He handles defensive interiors well so far, and that's a big thing for me. If I see you being able to, especially anchor wise and strength, be able to match defensive interiors, and you're having trouble versus the edges, I feel very comfortable with potentially kicking you inside. Continually losing the technique battle to Mateo Uiagalelei has major issue with missetting, allowing easier lanes to the quarterback. So you think about undersetting, which is you let too much of an outside shoulder angle to the quarterback, oversetting, which is you let too much of a gap inside. So he just consistently ended up being, in the wrong spot from time to time. So he ended up continuing to be long-armed, does an excellent job versus defensive interiors and those without the length advantage. He ended up oversetting again. I definitely think he is a guard based on his issues and how they are mitigated. He ended up falling apart as the game kind of progressed, and I said he's not winning the majority of these reps so far, and it is clear. I am so severely let down. I hate it. But as a guard, I really do think he's going to shine. He will be featured in the guards and centers video because I think he's going to be a lot higher than what people think based on this. But he's a feisty guy. I do really like him. It's just as a tackle, I do think that there's going to be legitimate limitations. He's, losing to somebody who I have outside of my top 15 edge rushers. There's some concerns. Let's talk at Monroe Freeling at number 20. Again, someone who's getting a lot of hype, really good player. And again, C is adequate for the NFL. So if you see C grades, you're like, oh, what the hell? You don't like him? Like, no, that's solid. B's are like compliments. B pluses are like big compliments. A's are just phenomenal. So very hard to get into that A category. But for Monroe Freeling, he was somebody who subbed in at left tackle and right tackle. So good versatility there. But let's talk about his game versus Texas. He's not an explosive athlete off the bat, which, again, you don't have to be the most explosive guy on planet Earth. He was late on a snap, so he ended up for a quarterback sneak. He ended up, reacting late. So the ball was snapped. It took him a quarter of a second to go. And you might think that's not a big deal, but when the defender jumps and the defender now has a quarter second step, or you think about it in terms of steps, 1 or 2 steps on you, it could end up being pretty bad, especially in a very time-intensive situation like a quarterback sneak. He had a pretty rough start, to be honest, and he's pretty bad as a run blocker so far, has had a flash or 2 as a pass blocker, but the losses are scary. He needs to learn how to re-anchor. So you have an initial anchor, right, where, if somebody runs into you, we already talked about this. I kind of forgot. But, he ends up having to, if your initial anchor is broken, being able to re-anchor is one of the biggest things I look for, because sometimes just guys, you're going to end up losing your initial anchor. Re-anchor is more important in my opinion, but needs to learn how to do that. Learned how to protect his outside shoulder, which is really good. Even though he's not the most athletic guy, he ended up adjusting, and I do really like seeing that. I said he bit on an inside fake for a pressure, ended up being subbed out for like a couple series this game, which is really weird. Ended up being brought back in. Definitely has some power to him. Dude has some mitts, so I think he might have 10+ inch hands. The dude has monster size hands. Kick slides underrated, which is, he's not explosive, but again, he actually gets some good range there. Gets thrown too much as a run blocker. Not going to be good as a guard, and he's 6'7". Shouldn't put him there in the first place. Has 1 or 2 pass blocking reps a quarter that are awesome, mixed with a lot of mediocrity. So for a team like the Eagles, I really do like the fact that you could probably just put him as a really deep left tackle, probably third stringer. But Monroe Freeling, definitely somebody that surprised compared to some of the guys that were before him. Again, you guys can see those on Patreon. JC Davis is at number 19. Talk about his game versus Penn State. He ended up making the cover art, and if you look at the grades, he is adequate or slightly above in every category. So this is the first tier where I have it being draftable. 60+ is draftable grade based on their current talent level. And yes, things are always subject to change, but I think it's more important to watch progression and admit where they are and get excited for where they should be rather than, be those guys who pull numbers out of their ass trying to be like, oh, this guy's like extremely high ceiling. Like, listen, buddy, if you're just going to put somebody super duper high because you think they have a high ceiling, you're admitting the fact that you are completely pulling that out of your ass. There's certain spots where we'll talk about guys like Alex Harkey and Isaiah World where they're going to a spot where it's an elevated level to where it's like, hey, these guys are really good. I'm going to give them like an it factor boost, but that shouldn't put them multiple tiers above where they should be as a player just because you get excited about what they could be. Some guys just want to be early on some stuff. I could give a rat's ass if I'm early on a player who needs to develop a lot. I prefer to be, early on the guys who actually have the talent level to catch someone's eye because I do think people get lost in the shuffle. But talk about JC Davis's game versus Penn State. Not a fan of how he uses his shoulder in short range. So his run blocking, he does like to use his shoulder a little bit too much. Weirdly snatched Abdul, ended up posting that, but I mean, Abdul, he like flipped him sideways. I'm like, the hell's going on here? He does not engage very like at a good range. So he has super soft hands, ended up oversetting, leaving the inside open for a pressure. Not necessarily a great athlete overall. And again, I mean, he's adequate in these categories. Like we're talking about, there's some really good athletes in this class. Super soft. Oh, I ended up saying that already. Handled holding the outside shoulder well. So even when a guy tries to attack his outside shoulder, I do love that he ends up kind of like getting his outside hand onto that, like the edge rusher's outside shoulder and doesn't give it up. Like, I love that. That is a very good trait to have, which is why some people think he has to be a guard. I have not given up on him as a tackle yet, but that's a conversation for after I get through this. Gets beaten badly inside. The timing has been solid overall, though. Like, he knows when to punch, which is really good. Has had lapses with IQ right after I say things like that. Has good core strength. There's many opportunities for him to fall due to awkward force angles. So like a defender popping him from the side and, he ends up staying upright. So it's good to see when he has that balance, that core strength. He's adjusted well for inside counters. So it's good to see him make those in-game adjustments. He ended up snatching Dennis Sutton, mainly fucks up in weird spots, like super congested areas or with weird blocking concepts. And that's something that's a big like positive for JC when you're messing up in areas that probably are high opportunities for mess ups. It's like, okay, if you're messing up in areas where you shouldn't, I have a lot more concern. Has gotten far more powerful as the game progressed. He ended up lunging, and then the defender got a clean swim win. He has so many RPO and option plays, it's hard to get a gauge for his IQ because essentially he has to basically set or block for two different plays at once. You don't get to see how mentally he is processing where he should be. So that is a little bit unfortunate. Ended up then getting over assertive and then overset. So again, allowing too much room to the inside. Ended up going after the edge rusher. And there was a player I talked about before. I think it was Nolan Rucci, funnily enough. So yes, if you guys were wondering if he's on this list, he is not. He's a guard to me. But he ends up going after the edge rusher. And I love guys who are tenacious and fighters, but you really do need to stay and protect the pocket. It is not about you going and attacking a defender. I'll just put that out there. But regardless, ended up getting over assertive, ending up allowing another inside win. He did not set his anchor and got someone into his chest, allowing for his anchor to get blown up. Again, with the inside loss, I don't know why he did not continue to do what he adjusted earlier in the game. Needs to be careful with his leverage, can let up big time with his anchor randomly, so his anchor fluctuates from time to time. He ended up dipping his head, allowing an inside spin move, so when you dip your head, you're not looking, you're not processing. Most of the time, you're not playing the game you should. But then he gets sloppy when initial contact's not ideal. I still see some tackle qualities, especially strength outside of the with his outside shoulder, but he has some crippling deficiencies, which is why he is here at 19. Cage Casey is there at number 18, and this is somebody who I do believe more as a guard. Again, they are pretty much adequate in everything. And then there's some like mobility and hands placement that I really do like. But let's talk about his game versus Penn State. I do like to keep these games relatively similar just so you guys get to see apples to apples. But little late off the ball to start, ended up being a bit manhandled. Nice hand placement and pass protection off the bat. Good switch in the run game, but needs to maintain better control. I knew off the bat when he was doing his doing his kick slide, that his anchor was shit and then ended up being annihilated. Definitely a leverage thing with this one. Did not see it earlier, so hopefully it's not the norm. Unfortunately, it is. He has this dumb issue of being so far on his heels that there is no leverage. And think about it. If stand right now on your heels, like the back of your heels, and tell me if somebody ran into you at full speed and tried to bench press your ass that you would not land on your tush. It's not gonna happen. Like that's just it's gonna happen. So I just don't know why. I don't know why he does this. It's really, really bad. But really needs to process how to stay in front of a defender in the run game because he does a great job, but they slip by or past him pretty easily when he does not. He's up there with the with the worst blocker, or excuse me, with the worst lower mechanics in the class. Huge drop off in terms of strength from Alex Harkey, who we'll talk about much later in this. So he was the guy I watched before. Uses way too much body for how tall he is. So again, talking about that, he looks taller than 6'5", to be fair, but yeah, he doesn't utilize his length well. But he does use his good length and pass protection at least, and the footwork has gotten more consistent as the game goes on. Genuinely shocked no one's trying to bull rush him when he has shown the tendency to get on his heels. Late reaction to a blitzer with an inside move for a clean pressure, let up another inside move, and did it again. So whenever I see guys struggle in space, I usually think they're best at guard. Just does not win the strength battle. His kick slide did not have enough range when engaging and allowed an outside shoulder to be taken for a sack. So, I mean, I think that there's definitely some guard in him. If he uses proper leverage, I think he can have a good anchor, and I do think he'll be more consistent as a guard. Anthony Donkoh is next. I really like this guy. He is my #1 rated offensive lineman from the Penn State group, which is and kind of the antithesis of what, the common consensus is right now. Donkoh usually looked at below Rucci, below Shelton, which to be fair, I think Shelton as a guard is rated noticeably higher. But as a tackle, I think even though Donkoh will probably be kicked into guard, Donkoh's the best. That's my opinion. But let's talk about his game versus Ohio State, where he came in quarter 2. Definitely has some power, especially versus the second level. Nice length usage, but then he ended up giving up his outside shoulder badly. I can already tell that he is better than Rucci, so there's just like that instant eye test. Poor open field tracking, so he ended up snatching Sawyer, but would like better anchoring while doing it. So he ended up pushing him down, right? But you think about the pocket as the 5 guys here, he ended up drifting pretty much damn near the quarterback in order to snatch. And well, especially if you fail, you're allowing the pocket boundary to just get absolutely yeeted. But not a fan of doing that. He is a snatch king. Like, he just snatches everybody. Like, I don't know why, but he is strong and he picks up on it right away. Needs to work on his overall anchor, needs to control his lower half much more, because I think he can anchor. He just chooses to focus elsewhere. So the upper and lower body just not connected. And I do think the lack of experience on average will end up giving that to him. So I do think as time goes on, it should be better. He has shutdown ability if you tweak the lower half. Very clunky, but built to play tackle. This dude needs to learn how to anchor. It's getting sad. Huge upside, but he'll probably be put to guard and not get a shot until Rucci leaves or an NFL offensive lineman coach tries him out. So really hoping Donkoh can end up having a potential chance to, make something happen, but it is a little bit unfortunate where the situation he's at. Chris Adams is so fun. That weight is not a typo. He is 277 pounds, but this guy plays better than the majority of guys in this class. It's kind of nuts. But the only all-22 I have, because I only grade these players in all-22, was versus Navy. Of course, I ended up seeing some other game tape of him, and it is consistent across the board. But I only want to give you guys game grades from all-22. And I like making my opinions from all-22. Insanely explosive, as he should be. He already gave up the outside shoulder. He lunged when firing his hands, giving up an easy angle. Number 33 apparently looks really fun. I don't know. I like giving shout outs to players when I watch. And I said, dude needs to chill with lunging. So it's just obviously when you are undersized, you kind of have to take the battle to them. I understand, but I do think Chris Adams probably he's going to be kicked to the inside, obviously, but needs to learn how to block with his back to the ball, because he takes shitty angles with easy shed chances and lanes to the ball carrier. He stopped blocking early after shutting a defensive end down, letting up a pressure. He had a simulated guard rep that wasn't bad. He has some legitimate power. Needs to stop lunging and dipping his head. Definitely has some legit wins, but the losses and tendencies are scary. Good pancake block with good core strength. He tends to have harder time versus defensive ends than he does defensive interiors. I love his energy and desire to lay out a dude. I definitely want him on my team. I just don't know what to do with him. He does have some legit awesome reps. Another pancake versus a defensive interior this time. His anchor holds up well for his size, but he definitely is not. Is definitely is not a great asset of his. Which again, he's 277. Probably hard to have a good anchor at that size. I get how he could have a good game as a pass protector versus Navy, but these military guys are usually headaches versus the run, and he's annihilating them. So that was the thing. You got to look at it through context. He's not facing high end technicians, especially as a pass blocker. But I mean, Army, like military dudes are gritty as hell. So it's good to see him be able to match that energy and win. We'll need to improve his IQ noticeably to work in the NFL, but he has some amazing traits for being his size. I actually have a lot of faith in Chris Adams. I mean, as a guard, I think he can be absolutely dominant. This is going to be a really fun one. Transfer from Rice to Ohio State, Ethan Onianwa. This guy is really, really fun. Like, he is very fun. First off, great build, 6'6", 357. Not necessarily the slowest guy on earth. We'll talk about his game versus Army again. Limited tape from Rice, but Army. There's guys. I think Elomo Dozier, who ended up transferring to Georgia, ended up getting to see him as well. But this guy looks like a fucking savage off the bat. He shoots his hands into the chest plate, so it's good to see at least during pass protection. Let up an inside pressure, very, very heavy feet, giving huge guard vibes. So that's why, like, usually when you have spatial awareness issues, don't have really smooth feet, you're probably better at guard. Did not see the wide 9 rusher until the last second. That's kind of an issue for me. He kind of moves like a guard as well. I said, honestly, for how garbage the lower mechanics are, he does do a good job staying square with the defender. His hands do slide more than pop, so I don't like that, but end up getting hurt right there as well. Short and sweet, but Ethan is somebody who has a great frame, good length. The mobility is certainly a little bit worrisome, and I do think that he will end up probably being a guard in the NFL. There's only 64 tackles, 64 guards, so there is a role potentially for him, but he is definitely on that developmental track where I think he'll be probably on a practice squad for a hot minute. But very good job by Ohio State, because it is pretty on par with the majority of tackles they've had. But we're jumping to a whole new tier here with the developmental tier with Corey Robinson II. Let's talk about his game versus Georgia. I think he ended up allowing 3 pressures over the entire last year. So that's kind of huge. Actually, Corey Robinson transferred to Arkansas. Shout out to Arkansas. I am not adjusting the graphics because I do not have time, but I love you guys and I want you guys to appreciate the fact that I remembered that. I pulled that off the rip. But not Georgia Tech, Arkansas. Transferred there, but he is from Georgia Tech, so we'll leave that there for the time being. Weird run block on play 1, so we're talking about his game versus Georgia. Hands really far outside as a run blocker. Not gonna lie, I'm not seeing someone who performed at the level that he did, so I'll just put that out there. His hands are slipping into a hug. He did end up hugging a lot of players. He ended up being hurt for a series. He's definitely a feisty player. Definitely not the pass protector the stats suggest. Blocked a defender into a run lane, not out of. And I ended up wondering if he was on a snap count because he randomly kept getting subbed in and out, even though he wasn't hurt on certain plays. Clearly gets out strengthed by edges and defensive interiors alike. So the power is not necessarily there. Maybe the mentality is, but the actual strength is not. He is effective, but it does not appear to be translatable, especially at the rate that his stats suggest. Anchor is a bit sketchy. It will look rock solid, and then bull rush will blow it up. Beat by an inside move. I don't know how that was not accounted as a pressure. His feet are super close from run blocking. I don't know why these defensive linemen don't try to stack and shed more. I said, why the F are these defensive linemen slowing up before contact? It wasn't like they were doing read steps. Like, they actually would be charging in and then slowing up. And it wasn't a contain type of slow up. It was just like not wanting to transfer the energy. It was weird. Long arms, enigma of a player. Bottom line, if you guys want a quick summary, but Arkansas tackle, Corey Robinson, forgive me on that. Let's talk about Trey Zuhn next. This guy's going to be a guard in the NFL. He has apparently 31.5-inch arms, but he's a really fun player and a very good player. So let's talk about his game versus Texas. Loving the mobility, but yeah, the arms are extremely short. I love how he tries to utilize length with hand fighting. So he tries his best. Obviously, there are limitations. Has some good pop in his hands too. Simulated guard rep looked good. And if you hear again, simulated guard rep, I don't know if I said this earlier in that the YouTube episode, but basically, if you have another tackle next to you, if you have a tight end next to you, how do you operate when you don't have essentially one half of you open? And a lot of guys, some look very uncomfortable there. Some guys look very comfortable, and Zuhn did. Has good anchor for someone who's always losing the length battle. Has some good punches for sure. Appreciate his re-anchor because the initial anchor could be iffy. Needs to be less erratic in space and be calmer. Lunged on the goal line and whiffed. Should thrive as a guard. So really excited for Zuhn. I do think that he's a very good offensive lineman, but I do think there's just physical limitations that do not work. Austin Barber ended up like his initial grade bummed me out, but when looking at how bad this tackle class is, I'm like, he is still a pretty top end offensive lineman in the class. And he's a good player. He has that flexibility as well. But Austin Barber, 6'6", 322, his tendencies really scream offensive guard to me. Even though he has 35 and a half or 33 and a half inch arms, 35 and a half would be crazy. 33 and a half inch arms per Florida. We'll talk about his game versus Tennessee. So good foot speed and hand fighting, but got instantly pushed to the quarterback. Not a fan of that. Needs to watch his hands getting on shoulder pads. So not a huge fan of that necessarily, but ended up getting beat out with his outside shoulder by Joshua Josephs. Love Joshua Josephs. Big fan of him. One. He needs to fire his hands into the chest plate. Has missed a few times because they're too wide. And I said, not going to lie, I kind of like him in these simulated guard reps. So ended up already showing off the bat. Needs to watch out for freezing his feet on contact. Some guys just stop their feet when they fire their hands. Can't do that. Feet freezing is the core of his issues combined with his wider hands. Not going to lie, these problems would vanish at guard. I genuinely am getting Pro Bowl guard vibes from him if he can end up, polishing up. He can get lungy in open field. Got toesy, ended up being thrown by a defender. Anchor has not gotten taken since the first play. So again, C+. I mean, it's adequate for sure. Transition blocks very well. His arms are pre-extended to receive contact. I like guys who will go and push out their arms rather than just like keep them out and then receive contact. Not a huge fan of that. He ended up being chopped. His arms got chopped, allowing easy pressure when you leave your arms out there, kind of telling a defender where they're going to be. Maybe I have overestimated his foot speed, gave up the outside shoulder clean to a wide 9 for a sack. Just got embarrassed by JPJ 2 times in a row. Caught lunging and the edge went right by. Josh Josephs ended up got chipped and still got his outside shoulder. So like the tight end chipped him and he still ended up losing that. Got long armed as well. I do think he's going to be a guard. Just does not handle space well with adjusting angles. I'm convinced he cannot be an NFL tackle based on how he continues to freeze his lower half and give up easy angles. There's definitely a future for him, but I do think it's not as certain as what maybe some other people think. But let's go on to number 11. Let's talk about Tristan Leigh, and we'll talk about his game versus Texas. Tristan Leigh is somebody who I've roller coastered on in terms of my opinion, but I do think he's a very solid player. And he's always been someone who I love his tenacity. So talk about his game versus Texas. Short, choppy feet, but drops a bit much off the bat. So he ends up being able to get some range. Does a nice job staying square to the player, which is super key. Handles stunts well. Can freeze the lower feet when firing his hands. Got long-armed. Anchor is a bit of a concern, but he is also feisty. These charge blocks are incredible. The dude comes downhill like a freight train. So that's the thing. He charges up, but he's also coming downhill. He got fucked up by an inside move. So not a fan of that. Goes to war every single play. Could definitely see the upside with him, even if it's at guard. His arm length does seem a bit worrisome. He has a place in the NFL, but will need the right coaching to reach the potential to get legitimate reps. Emil Wagner is next at number 10. Emil Wagner is a fun player. Let's talk about his game versus Ohio State. Getting some first round buzz. I'm not there yet, but I mean, essentially everything except for something that naturally will continue to get better with time, which are mechanics, are adequate or good. And that's a great place to be. He is twitched up, has some strong arms, giving some guard flexibility vibes. Good patience after showing some anxiety early. Handle the stunt well. Definitely seeing some first round potential with him. I love how he shows where to go when transition, or how he knows where to go when he transitions blocks. His footwork can improve a bit. Uses length very well to mitigate push on his anchor, which is a little bit weaker than hoped, his anchor being. Dipped his head and then ended up and under pursued, leading to a pressure. So did a good job riding the pocket to make up for his mistakes. So like if he ends up letting his outside shoulder, he ends up keeping his arms on the player and just like kind of drifting him away from the quarterback. Ended up throwing Jack Sawyer. Love that. Needs to get rid of this tendency to get toesy when going on a full extension. It has gotten him to freeze his lower half and has led to to easy block sheds. Second time under pursuing outside shoulder, but he has the mobility to do it, or he has the mobility to not under pursue. He's just not doing it for some reason. Starting to whiff a bit, needs to calm down. The footwork is just not good. Should be a guard if he goes to the NFL until he fixes that. Also 293. Heavy, stiff footsteps. You can tell how young and inexperienced he is. There is first round ceiling, but there is much to learn, and he needs to get his weight up to be a true tackle in the NFL. Really good foundation, though. Like, really good foundation. If you add weight, most likely your anchor will improve. If you also get more experience, your mechanics should improve. It is a pretty clear path to be a first round pick. Let's talk about Caden Proctor at number 9. A lot of people have him as their number 1. I think anybody who watches him definitely will be like, yeah, they're pulling a projection out of their ass just because he's a big dude. Listed 6'7", 369, so absolute mountain of a man. But let's talk about his game versus LSU. He fucks defenders up on double teams, so I love that. His hands are softer than I hoped for. Would like for his hands to land better on the second level. His initial anchor can be pretty spotty. He flashed some re-anchor, but he might be the first tackle I would say should be more on his toes, which is not the case because we talked about Cage Casey earlier, but this was the first tackle I studied in the class. I really needs to work on his power and anchor, which is hilarious for being 370 pounds. Does not handle space well, still feels very raw. But Proctor is an absolute mountain. He should continue to improve, but his downsides are petrifying. But again, just needs to continue improving overall. Francis Mauigoa is next. We're jumping to the next tier, which is the fringe starters. I do think Francis is a guard, but let's talk about his game versus Louisville. Standing a bit tall initially, so got to stay a little bit lower. Arms definitely look short based on the defender getting to him first while he's trying to reach and punch at the defender. He has some good pop to him. I love how patient he is to fire his hands, especially with the arm length. He froze his feet when firing his hands to allow an outside shoulder, so ended up giving up his outside shoulder. Really bad rep overall. As stated before, he froze the lower half, allowing a pressure on its outside shoulder, then did nothing to help Cam with plenty of opportunities to block other players. Long-armed and backed towards the quarterback, beginning to think he's a guard, so that's where I went from tackle to guard. Hands slipped when he ended up firing, so ended up hitting a player and they just kind of like bounced off. Simulated guard rep looked nice as a run blocker. Has some awesome reps in pass pro, showing some of the strongest punches and some really good hand fighting, but it is clear he's way more suited to be a guard with his arm length and why he ends up failing. He gave up the outside shoulder again when trying to win the leverage battle. Has a solid enough re-anchor, but the initial anchor is very spotty. Inside pressure to Gillette, who has been having trouble going up against their tackle for the Chiefs. So shout out to Josh Simmons. Inside pressure again to Gillette. Just ended up clubbing a defender, which is funny because usually the defender clubs the offensive lineman. Not a guaranteed guard, but it's just such an uphill battle, always losing length. So really big fan of Mauigoa. I would like him on the inside. Charles Jagusah is next. Love this guy. I called him Tasmanian Devil. So he had one game at left tackle. It was in the natty. So this dude is raw as hell. So love that. I said, what a game to start, make your first tackle start, because he played one game at guard as well. But again, like for how raw he is, he did a fantastic job. He is feisty and athletic. And I said, oh man, he's my type of offensive lineman with this movement twitch. Over pursued JTT around the outside shoulder, but I definitely understand there's some nerves early on, and let's see how he ends up learning as the game goes along. Could use more length to long-arm defenders rather than just losing the range battle, because I think he has the length and just doesn't use it. Needs to watch over-angling his shoulders to compensate for his outside shoulder. It lets up an easy path to cut under him for a pressure. So he tries to essentially angle like that, where you're just allowing an easier inside lane. Stay square, my brother, which again, first game as a tackle versus second round edge rusher in the NFL, like a really good player. But he did a good job handling a stunt. He needs to be careful when freezing his lower half. I said, watch out. He needs to watch out for being too tall and then losing the leverage battle, especially at 6'7". Definitely showing how green he is, but he's flashed amazing immense potential. He still plays like a guard, which, again, if you're just playing tackle, it will happen. Needs to be careful in pass protection of standing too tall. There we go. Nice nimble feet with good pass protection reps, so he ended up adjusting that mid-game. Very susceptible to inside counters with, I said, a bad pressure with, it's just a bad chess match with JTT. Will say this guy can fly in a straight line. Kind of feels like a young Xavier Truss, but at NFL level, like a legitimate NFL talent. Starting to let his hands drift wider to compensate. So it is kind of probably like nerves and being a little bit uncomfortable and trying to widen the hands rather than hit the chest plate. He got block shed because he lunged in the run game. Given his amazing athletic traits, I would care less about my outside shoulder and try to prevent the inside counters and ride the edge around the pocket boundary. Low-key comp would be Xavier Truss times Tali Fuwaga. That's pretty ballsy. Beat by an inside spin. Lucky that JTT slipped. No one is getting his outside shoulder. I said the real insane, he has real insane potential, but is obviously so green at the position, and he ended up going up against veteran technicians with size, so it's bound to be a bit of an embarrassment. But he held his own quite well. Still think a good guard could be a good spot for him if these tendencies do not work themselves out. I do think with the current rate that he's at, he could even start in the NFL. At number 6, we have Xavier Chaplin, who transferred from VT to Auburn. Talk about his game versus Clemson. Not a fan of him dipping his head on play 1. He looks both slow and nimble at the same time. Some low IQ moments already. Has a nice first slide, so his like first kick slide is actually really solid, good range. He got his hands pushed down, but lost a lot of ground focusing. Oh, he pushed the defender's hands down, but he lost ground focusing on just fighting the hands. Plays zone plays like a toddler learning to walk with his hands out in front, just stumbling forward. It is funny. He has some weird movements. I highly recommend going and checking that out. He just kind of like walks almost like a zombie, like think about Frankenstein. I think that's a better way to describe it. Re-anchor is a massive concern. Definitely a pass protector over a balanced blocker or a run blocker. Great length usage in pass pro. He ended up having a false start actually a couple times. He's had some issues with that. Great hand fighting and snatch, and definitely has some power to his punches. Up there for the best pass protector in the class. Really needs to learn how to anchor better. Heavily over pursued an edge, leading to a massive inside hold that he ended up letting up a holding call for the defender taking advantage of. Partially blame the running back for being asset pass protection. It seems like X thinks that X being Xavier, thinks that he's on a particular side to assist, and he's just not in the right spot. So the running back, I do think, was a big issue there, and it wasn't by Shelton. It was the other guy. I don't know who he is, but he sucks. Hate to say it, but it is what it is. Dude, this running back is fucking asset blocking. Love the strength and finesse. He has that range, but though it is desirable, I will say when he tends to give up on the play early, huge ceiling, but I'm concerned with how bad his losses are and how easy it is for him to get in a bad position. High ceiling though. I mean, again, like really, really high end pass blocking technician. And that's like as good as you can get for a pass blocker right now, at least. Alex Harkey is next at number 5. We're going to speed this up a little bit just so we can end up relaxing a little bit and enjoying our trip. But Alex Harkey is awesome. Texas State tackle, transferring to Oregon to play that right tackle spot. He is older. He will be 25 when he goes into the NFL, but I do really like the fact that he's taking a step up in competition as well. We'll talk about his game versus ASU. It was his toughest game last year. He's flashing some smooth movement off the bat. I need him to maintain control of the second level box. Got some good pop to him, great punches too. And his hands in the run game can definitely improve. He needs to get his hands more inside. So that's kind of an issue. He needs to get his hands more inside. Super patient and controlled the pass blocker. Defender attempted to do a ghost move, and he knew where the quarterback was, so he handled it perfectly. So the ghost move was attempted. He knew where the quarterback was and redirected the defender properly. When he fires at range, he has great hand placement. So it is only when he gets it's in closer range that it can get dodgy. He handles edges better than defensive interiors, so that's why I think he's a true tackle. They also used him at guard quite a bit. Would like a little better re-anchor. Has some Fuwaga to him, but not at that level. Actually did really well with the simulated guard rep, ended up failing multiple times. Shout out to, I think his name's CJ Fight on Arizona State. Really good defensive interior. Ended up being annihilated by him a couple times, but really needs to chill with the late assist and switch because he does end up like trying to just assist the guard off the bat, and he neglects the edge rusher he's supposed to block. It's really weird, but ended up happening a couple times. But regardless, Harkey going to a spot where he can end up continuing to improve as a technician. You might say, oh, he's old, there's not much of a ceiling. But for me, when you end up going to a better area to learn, I think there's some room for legitimate improvement, and I love that. Jumping to a whole new tier, we have the starters. We have 4 starters in this class, beginning with Isaiah World, also transferred to Oregon. So Oregon has the 4th and 5th best tackle in the class. Talk about his game versus Boise State. Love the nimbleness of the feet, but my guy, please learn how to anchor. Really good athlete. He handled a blitzer very well, good patience, and his anchor at least held up on that play. He got toesy and ended up being thrown versus the run. Very fun pulling, like as a pulling tackle. Really good mobility. His very solid so far. Been super fun to watch. Does a one-arm reach out and he refires his hands. Seemed to have very solid IQ. Would like for him not to dip his head so much on run blocks. Really needs to watch his anchor because I've seen him lock down, but he just can lose sight of it. Would like a little less ferocity and more technique as a run blocker because he doesn't have a ton of upper power and it can cause him to slide off. Handles stunts amazingly well. Needs to watch out for lunging while firing his hands and firing his hands low. He ended up fixing it the next play, so at least there's some in-game adjustment. No re-anchor so far. Needs to learn how to do that, which I think at Oregon he can. Definitely has room to add mass as well. I do want to see him. He was listed 6'8". I do think he should be around 315, 320. But regardless, I know he's like apparently 6'5" to 6'6", just FYI. But knowing he definitely has room to add mass, helps. He helps when he's not engaged with the player. I do like seeing that. It's kind of like that team member mentality. Would like a little bit more consistent length usage. Has these reps where he has a kick-ass initial anchor. I don't know why there are more reps where he's on skates with no recovery. And I said he is poised to be a superstar. So really, really good player, a player who I want for my Steelers. We'll see if that happens. Caleb Lomu. A lot of people have him tackle 1. I don't give a shit. He's really damn good. That's what we need to remember about this. If everybody likes him, he's probably going to fail. No, he is a really fun player. And unfortunately, his arms look a little small, so there's a chance he is a guard. But I still have faith in him as a tackle. Let's talk about his game versus Iowa State. Later in the year, also one of his lower graded games. Excellent hand fighting and leverage off the bat. Good mover. He looks small. I mean, you see him. He looks like he's 6'4" as well. He just looks like a smaller player. Really nice transition in the run game. Seems to have a very high IQ with his transition blocks. Love his game so far. Good wide base. The arms do look a bit shorter. He locked down Oyedim, but I said, to be fair, anyone can. It was just an elite rep with no positive notes at all for the defensive interior. Inside moves can get early success on him, but he does rebound to at least mitigate the damage well. He seemed to take a planned first step and then react. And I think that's my biggest issue with Lomu outside the arm length. He kind of is proactive, but it's almost planned in his head what he's going to do first, and then he ends up seeing what the defender does and reacts. I understand that to a degree, but it can get you out of position very quickly. So I don't like seeing that with players, especially if they consistently get things like wrong from time to time that puts them in danger. And I have seen that with him. Can definitely see why some people want him as a guard with the shorter arms and willingness to leave his inside shoulder open to counters, but it is not a necessity. Handles zone blocks well, handles defensive interiors very well, could be successful both at guard and tackle. So, I mean, Caleb Lomu is, as advertised, a damn good player, but I do think there is a legitimate chance he ends up kicking into guard. And if he does, he's going to be great. If he doesn't, I still think he's going to be really damn good. Spencer Fano, though, his buddy, is the true tier 0 blue chip tackle. And there is one other player that we'll talk about. We'll talk about Spencer Fano's game versus Iowa State as well, kind of get apples to apples for that. But my Lord, he does not look 302. He does not look technically smaller than Caleb Lomu. I am a little bit questioning whether Caleb Lomu's stats are right or Spencer Fano. I think he's a little bit heavier than that. But I talk about his game versus Iowa State. Nice wide stance, leaves the inside shoulder a little bit too open, so it's maybe just a Utah thing. Uses much more enforceful of a blocker than Lomu, and I said, oh man, he is just fucking good at refiring his hands and being strong and nasty. He's great handling of transition. Even Dominique Orange had some trouble. He started winning the anchor battle, but Spencer Fano did my favorite thing in the world, ended up having a successful re-anchor. Great mirroring ability as well. Just slammed a dude into the dirt. What a beast. And I said, bottom line, he is a ridiculous talent. I mean, Spencer Fano is an absolute beast. I'm a huge fan of his game. Last but not least, Caleb Tiernan. Caleb Tiernan, I mean, also Fano has good arm length. Like, you could tell the difference. Like, he's built to be a true tackle in the NFL. Caleb Tiernan, though, I mean, he has, I believe, 32.5-inch official measured arms from Northwestern. I do think that's one of the downsides, which is why I dropped him a little bit. But this dude is so damn good. Like, so damn good. Let's talk about his game versus Ohio State versus guys who actually have really good length. Has a good one-arm reach out, ends up refiring his arms as well, or refiring his hands. Very fluid as a mover, great wall off on a gap run, so ended up, pretty much walling off the lane. Has pop to his hands, good handling of a stunt, good job slowing down a push on the pocket, has a good sense of where the pocket should be, and guides defenders around it, even if they're able to take his outside shoulder. Ended up pancaking a linebacker. He could get his lower half, his lower half could get a little too stiff when engaging versus the run, allowing some angles to change more than I'd like. I said, what a nitpick overall. Great heads up play to get a fumble. So, I mean, I do love seeing that. Not going to lie. I'm loving the tackles, which I ended up, unfortunately, watching like pretty much all the good ones at the beginning. Shout out to Alex Harkey. He ended up giving me some hope at the end. Has excellent composure with high-end hand fighting technique. Initially whiffed on a zone block, but immediately corrected and still landed his hands. Could be better with length usage as a run blocker. Such a fun chess match between him and JT. Both are making great plays and are giving each other real headaches. Not going to lie, the quarterback is actually pretty solid for Northwestern. Shout out to him. I know that we ended up seeing Preston Stone go there. So we'll see how that goes. Has a physical identity of a San Diego State offensive lineman when run blocking. I don't know how else to say it. So he's just, South Dakota State. He's just like a gritty, like northern player. So re-anchor versus Kenyatta, which is tough. Kenyatta he's a pocket buster. So I mean, Tiernan's able to do that. Inside counter got him once, but overall, wow, this guy is an absolute superstar. I don't think he's going to end up going to guard. He is 6'7.5". Going to be very hard to do that. And at 32.5-inch arms, he uses it really well. He places his hands well. I think he's going to be a superstar. Thank you so much for watching, showing the love you always do. I'll see you later. Peace.